Thanks everybody for coming. I'm excited to see you. I think this idea to have donor update meetings was Pat Hoffman's, who's one of our other donors, but also on our donor relations committee. And it was a great idea. I mean, ACLT was begun by volunteer donors, and we really take our relationship seriously. I mean, it's really critical to have volunteers, and it's really critical to have donors. And so this is a great way for you to hear sort of the inside story, what's going on, but also a chance for you to ask questions, for you to find out more about whatever you're concerned about. You can raise concerns, whatever it takes, whatever you need to make ACLT be the ACLT that you want to be proud of. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg to give us the introduction piece or the information piece, and then we can open it up for questions after that. Right?
Very good. I will go ahead and share screen then. Okay, so you see November 2022, and that's not a mistake because I presented to you about this new notion of revisioning Southern Maryland back last November. And I thought maybe we'd focus on some of that tonight and how that relates to our efforts at the regional level to create change and protect the critical lands of Southern Maryland. There's three pillars of sustainability, and they are healthy society, healthy environment, and healthy economy. And us environmentalists, we don't always want to pay as much attention to the last one, but the last one is just as important as the other two. Can't be ignored. If we're ever going to protect Southern Maryland's ecosystems, you have to have valid uses for those lands, particularly private lands that people find gainful employment from. So last November, we suggested that to our major donors that the region needs a change in perspective about the real economic assets of our region and how we can use them sustainably. And we noted that this region has very resilient lands, according to the Nature Conservancy. Matter of fact, some of the most resilient lands in the state. And green tourism in the US is big, netting almost $900 billion a year in consumer spending annually. And even in little old Bay region, the Delmarva Peninsula generates over $1 billion a year just in ecotourism. So what should Southern Maryland's vision be like? Well, we've already been getting into some aspects of that, certainly with the fishing industries and the crabbing industries and agriculture. But there are other things that can be done as well, such as improving our biking trails, extending our hiking trails, creating more public access to our waterways, while also educating and connecting more people to the land and water. And these are very compatible with our current agritourism industry and particularly our heritage tourism industries. And some very exciting things are coming along in that direction. And then back in February of 2023, I talked about visions to action, some of the things that were going on that would help support this notion of more green tourism. And I noted it was very exciting that there was discussion coming about making the Chesapeake Bay area a national park, talking about what that meant, and they could make it easier for green tourism. And so ACLT has been supporting this notion along with the 249 other organizations of the Choose Clean Water Coalition in the Chesapeake Bay region. And then the big thing we released last spring was the fact that U.S. Fish and Wildlife was considering expanding the Patuxent Refuge into southern Maryland. Big news. And its staff had 15 years ago tried to begin that process of expanding the refuge, but they lost their momentum. The formation of the Southern Maryland Conservation Alliance, though, was a huge help for the effort, because then there was a bunch of supporters that could stand up behind it to make it happen. So Fish and Wildlife picked it back up again, and then in the spring held listening sessions with the general public in 3 locations throughout Southern Maryland. SMCA members were asked to help get people out to these listening sessions. And of course, we had a very big one when it came about in Solomons. So what about, though, our efforts at the state level to conserve lands? Oh, and I wanted to point out also to you that Calvert County featured primarily in this effort. Looked like 80%, 75 to 80% of Calvert County was in their level of high interest due to the habitat that is still present in Calvert County. So then what are we doing to address climate change as well? So SMCA has been working at the state level to conserve lands. We met with SMCA. The SMCA worked with Forever Maryland last winter to begin to draft legislation and get a sponsor for legislation to set up a revolving loan fund for land trusts, and also to set a goal for how much land we should protect in Maryland. And we had suggested it's going to be easy to get to 30 by 30. That's 30% of the state's land mass conserved by 2030, because we're almost there. We'll be there maybe this year or next year. We will have met that goal. So we suggested to the writers of the legislation, why not go for 40% by 2040, and maybe even at some point 50% into the future. Probably wouldn't happen by 2050 though. But that was what our ask was back at the time. And meanwhile, SMCA was mapping out priority areas for conservation. The core team used the county's own maps for areas that they thought important, and melded that in with the network, the Nature's Network stuff that was done by U.S. Fish and Wildlife and a dozen major universities in New England, outlining the most critical lands from a wildlife core and corridor standpoint. Then the other thing we talked about in February is that we wanted to create a friends group for Fishing Creek. That's the creek that whose mouth is at Chesapeake Beach. That we needed to have a friends group there to help to expand our water quality blitz. And then we also reached out to organizations outside of Calvert County so that we could begin the process, maybe having friends groups throughout the 5-county region that were also participating in the blitz and testing water quality through lots of watersheds. So those were some of the things that we were hoping to achieve. And now I'll tell you what has happened since February, since last time we met. Well, we got a bill. A bill has been introduced to create the Chesapeake National Recreation Area. And that came about soon, not long after there was a public opinion poll that was done in 2022. And it was from Marylanders, Virginia residents, and District of Columbia, and 83% of those who participated supported the notion of a Chesapeake National Recreation Area, which would bring the U.S. Agencies into the realm of helping us with our efforts to get more people access to the water and also to have better programming. Now, this was the big exciting part, though, is we had been working with Lucille Walker for some time. Lucille Walker has been giving out grants for heritage projects for probably a decade. She's been the coordinator for Southern Maryland. But she initiated this notion of a national heritage area for Southern Maryland. And soon she was working with our US senators and Congressman Hoyer to get that process approved. And with a little bit of funding, she pulled this off in a year. So this was a shocker. We thought, as a matter of fact, the typical process is it takes 3 to 5 years to get the legislation ready and the southern, the region ready for a national heritage area. They got it done in a year. And their goal is to have their development plan in place in another year, which is like amazing speeds. And foolishly, they put me on the steering committee. I'm the I'm the only representative of a land trust that's part of this effort to do it because Lucille Walker realizes that retaining our cultural landscape means that we have to keep our rural lands intact. And that's like a key part of what we're doing. And so she wanted to have a land trust representative and she asked me to serve. And that ties in very well with bullet number 4 of what the purpose of natural heritage areas are: support historic conservation, preservation, natural resource conservation, heritage tourism, and education projects through public-private partnerships. Isn't that a nice tie-in to what we're trying to talk about? Changing the narrative of what Southern Maryland's economy should be all about. But we also have to have our locals interested in this stuff too. And so the Sustainable Calvert Sustainable Calvert Network organizations asked Buddy Hance to have a meeting with them. And thankfully he said yes. So we had a great informal session with him a couple of months ago. Buddy seems to be all in line and supporting the notion of what we're talking about. And at some point in time, we want to get ourselves in front of the Board of County Commissioners to make that big ask. But we're also going to need other nonprofits and businesses involved in this effort, particularly in creating bicycle trails, more hiking trails, and more access to public water. And so Clara Brill-Carlott, our assistant land manager, and I have been working with Patuxent Tidewater Land Trust, an organization out of Charles County, one out of Prince George's County, to form the Southern Maryland Active Recreation and Transportation Alliance. And so it is a new alliance to support people-powered. I can't read all of this bullet too well. Whoa, let me go back. People-powered active outdoor recreation and transportation in Southern Maryland, and that includes hikers, bikers, and paddlers. It's now a 501c3. We got that established in just about 3 months. They already have a donate button on their website. So that means they're official. And they're going to have like a kickoff meeting on September 29th. Down at the Patuxent Adventure Center, we have one businessman who's part of that, and he owns the Patuxent Adventure Center. And he's actually helped support us getting this whole thing started financially. So we're very grateful for that. So we will have this group that's out there meeting with county commissioners and other elected officials to help fund safer bikeways So when Shirley and I are riding down the road, we don't feel like we're getting buzzed every time we're out there. And to get better water access, to have real support for these kind of efforts. So I mentioned that we had talked about having the meetings for Fish and Wildlife Service. The one down at Solomon's had the best attendance. ACLT showed up in mass. We were so glad to see such a good turnout. And so they officially announced that their proposed area of interest, if it gets approved, is for 500,000 acres, of which 180,000 has not been protected. Of course, so ACLT's lands that it's conserved and work with the others that we work with to conserve here, these are part of that 500,000 acres, as is the lands in Battle Creek Cypress Swamp and down along Patuxent River, part of that 500,000 acres. And again, most of Calvert is in the area of interest. Their goal is going to be over the next dozen years or so to try to protect 40,000 acres of that. So that would be a nice chunk of land that will be hopefully a part of this effort to create a new refuge. And so this stuff takes a lot of momentum and energy, and SMCA has played a major role, and then our own volunteers have played a role in getting that support. It will be, if it's finally approved, it'll be the largest refuge in Maryland. So good for us if we can get it done. As to the legislation that I talked about earlier, it became the Maryland the Beautiful Act. It would establish revolving loan funds to empower land trusts to protect and conserve the natural environment across the state. And it does set the goal of protecting 40% of the land mass by 2040. I'm meeting with a whole bunch of folks on Tuesday, organized by Chesapeake Conservancy, to see how the heck we're going to get that done. And the task of actually managing that loan fund would be assigned to the Maryland Environmental Trust, for which I am co-chair. So how can this work? We're actually proposing, and I'm going to be proposing on Tuesday, we cannot loan out all the money that we need to reach the 40 by 40 goal. We need a revolving loan funds that helps the land trust do it without consuming the total cost of the price of those lands. So this is a strategy. The same strategy, by the way, that our board was just using with the property we just tried to purchase. And that is, our contract says we can back out of this contract if the property doesn't appraise for the price that we established, that if the land trust is not able to get Board of Public Works approval for the deal. And in addition, the contract says that settlement of the purchase of the property happens concurrently with the easement. Why that? Because that means we don't have to borrow all that money. The money that that would come from the easement would be at the settlement table. So then we only have to pay the difference. And then what if we're in addition able to assign this contract at the end to a conservation buyer? That means we never owned that property through the process. So we don't have to pay the settlement costs for it. So really makes us the one who arranges the dance, but doesn't have to dance to the largest extent possible. And then we're able just to pay the cost that it takes to do the deal, which involves paying for attorneys. Sometimes it may involve paying for perk tests. Sometimes it might require surveying off a piece of the land. And so here is just one example of how that could work. 100 acres of land is up for sale. it's appraised for $650,000. The easement value turns out to be 75% of that. That's $487,000. The difference between those two is $162,500. That's the money then that we need to, that cost needs to be then transferred to the conservation buyer. But a conservation buyer would probably be very anxious to buy a property for a 100-acre property for $162,000. And in fact, would probably be willing to pay twice that much, and it would still be a great deal. And so we'll be working with a bunch of buyers, and whoever gives us the best deal, the most interested in buying that property, we buy it. We're out of the deal, other than paying off that small loan to MET, and then we can go on to the next property. That's a very simplistic scenario of how it works. But in fact, we've been doing many of these things already. For example, we've not been buying properties until the easement money is at the table for the last 3 properties that we purchased. And therefore, we're not having to get out big loans to make it happen. So we did, in fact, try to buy the Hersey property. It's a piece of land. If you look across the red lines are Route 4. And if you see Port Republic and then you see ACLT owned property, that tells you how close this land is to where we are. It's just like some of that land is actually between old Route 4 and new Route 4 at Western Shores. So we tried to buy this land to conserve it. Unfortunately, we were outbid for it, and so it didn't move forward. We could not bid as high because of the way that the property, that the value was appraised for the easement. But I still think the process is very sound, and we may miss a few being safe, but we think we will also get quite a few and be able to preserve lands this way. Do we want to stop here just for a second? Have I crossed any I's at this point because it's so complicated? Do you understand what we're trying to do here?
I had a question about, have we done a workshop for all the realtors in terms of identifying conservation, or what can we do to get all the realtors to know about this?
That is a fantastic idea, and we do need to do that. We've been working with a couple of realtors to make this happen, a couple of the big ones, but we do need to hold a workshop with them. That is an excellent suggestion. Any
Hi.
other comments?
My compliments. It sounds like this is Joy, for those who
Yes.
don't know. What you've done here is basically eliminate some transaction costs and the anxiety of having to raise money that isn't going really, that's just going to further the process of the acquisition, if I understand correctly, and transferred those costs. In some cases, eliminated them. This just is very, very smart operating to me. I'm very impressed with what you've done with the new arrangement of sort of getting out of the dance and enjoying the process of playing a matchmaker.
Thanks. Many good ideas are stolen, and I'll have to admit that this one was stolen from Calvert Farmland Trust. They were using it before we did. We liked it so much, I said, why don't we try it?
When it comes to the management of that loan money that you talked, the revolving loan fund, with you in sort of that leadership position, does that mean we're not eligible, or can you recuse yourself so that you could vote on yes, that we should fund this project, or how would that work?
I would have to recuse myself from any of those such deals. But I mean, we have a board of 16 people, so it's not a big miss. Yeah. Okay, so finishing up, so that's also just to point out that this is around protected properties and our properties' interest in protection. It's really important that we are able to help conserve St. Leonard Creek as well. It's a beautiful creek, and I'll show you some data as we go forward. It's in need of some help. It's hurting a little bit, but it has fantastic potential for the future. So now I want to show you something that I'm not going to be going big public on, certainly not at this point in time. But it's about time that some of you know the insides of what the core team of SMCA is trying to do. And that is, we have a search engine on Zillow that whenever a property comes up in the 5-county region, we get notice of it. And if those properties happen to be in our area of interest, areas that we want to protect, then we try to assign it to one of the land trusts to try to conserve it. Now, East Marlton, upper left, is an entirely different story. And sometimes we're too late in the game. Well, when this property came up to our attention, it had already been approved as a major development in Prince George's County. And in South County, which should never be getting these kind of major developments. But it is such a rough piece of land. It looks like ACLT property. It is so rugged, and it has some old growth timber on it. It's beautiful, 600 acres of land. But this developer had managed to get a subdivision on it and was putting a big apartment complex. They would have to clear about 80% of that land, and this land perches above the Patuxent River, so you can bet a good bit of the sediment would one way or the other wind up in the Patuxent. But for I don't know what reason, he ended up giving the land to the Girl Scouts. And we thought, well, that's wonderful. Now it's going to become a park or something like that. But then the Girl Scouts started marketing it as the same project that the developer had originally tried to do. So the SMCA contacted them and told them about our concerns, told them that this happened to be an area of Prince George's County which does not have enough parkland, and that the county had been actively seeking parkland. And would they be interested in selling it to the county? They said they wouldn't even take the calls, they wouldn't even take the messages at all for a good while, until we made it a little bit more public. There was a letter in the Post from all of our organizations, 40-some organizations, saying, please, can we get this, Girl Scouts, would you please consider selling this at a very good price to the county? By the way, they paid nothing for this piece of land. Now, this would create great parkland for the folks in that area. And no. And I mean, it took some Girl Scouts themselves that came to the Girl Scouts and said, would you please consider selling it? And now it has begun the negotiation process, but that would be a huge win if we win this one. I mean, we came late to this game, but this land is not land that should have been developed anyway. The Walton properties were already also in Prince George's County, and hate to see these happen. We got active in it. We tried to protect it to see if there was an alternative, because this is in a Mattawoman Creek area, which one of the most pristine watersheds in the state of Maryland. And we did all we could to try to get program open space for somebody to rescue it, not able. Nelson Point, upper right, we have had some success with that. Property was identified. We think we've convinced a property owner there to put it in rural legacy. And then lower right is a property in St. Mary's County. And that came up to us actually by an ACLT member who had heard from somebody else, who had heard from somebody else. And now we've been told that a state program open space agent has been in touch with them. So these are the kinds of negotiations we're trying to make so that we don't lose any, or we lose the fewest possible prime properties remaining in Southern Maryland. See if we can't get them conserved. Now, the big news is Vaughn property on Maple Road is up for sale. I heard about it from a county commissioner. I called Calvert Farmland Trust, and we together worked out a plan about how this might be protected. And Calvert Farmland Trust is it's more in their area than our area. So I said, we'll let you guys go for it. And so I think they're going to be making a bid on this property in the next 2 months. I hope it's still there, because it is 216 acres of prime forest land and wildlife habitat. It's right in Fish and Wildlife's area of acquisition. And it's in a farming area that fortunately has remained a farming area. We'd love to see that property protected. But it's this kind of activism that hasn't been in place before. And with Sustainable Calvert Network, we now have a team that can help identify properties and protect them. So there's other things, of course, we can do with respect to climate change. And with the new solar panels on the barn out here, it is easy being green, and the energy generated from our solar panels is covering 98% of our energy needs for both the barn and office. And we're also, again, as mentioned earlier, working to expand Friends groups. Why? Because the strength of citizen action. You know, a lot has been happening great up from the top down. For example, the EPA mandating cleanup of the bay and the works that they've done to clean up the septic tanks and help farmers comply with nutrient reduction requirements. But it still takes a grassroots effort to really make change happen. And that's what the Friends groups are doing out there. And now that we've gotten some of the other counties engaged, they had their streams tested, and they've bought into this whole process too. So we had 98 sites sampled this past spring for water quality, nitrogen and phosphorus. And all the green dots that you see on this map represent good water quality. Yellow represents fair, and red, well, you probably know what that represents, that there's a problem. But in many cases, we didn't know it was a problem, and we wouldn't have known it's a problem if we hadn't have done the stream testing. And now we're able to work with enforcement officials to find out what may be wrong in those locations and see if we can, is it a septic tank that's failed or just being dumped directly into a creek? What's happening in these locations? And we can stop the bleed, so to speak, by being proactive. So what's happening, however, in our own watersheds, we certainly have not lost sight of our responsibility here. In the winter last year, we sent postcards and an invite to a local land conservation meeting online. We had a half dozen or so people involved in that and worked with them to see if they were ready. There's a couple that are ready, and we've a couple of them look good candidates for Maryland Programs Open Space for endangered species. So our hope is that there'd be some successes there. We have been, again, monitoring properties for sale, and we've been wrapping up this 21 campaign to protect the Yo property, the Yell property, and all those other projects that were tied in. And that was a result of the big event that we had at the Yo House. We had over 200 people there. Chris on our call, our staff person played a great role in organizing this event. And we're able to show not only the restored house, we had donations from people throughout the community for the restored house, for our interns to live there. And we also got a tour of the trail that was cut into the property and the barns that were on the property. Of course, we're never done at the local level when it comes to citizen action on new things that the county is coming up with. And the county is proposing rezonings throughout the county. Much of what is in the new zoning ordinance and maps is good, and some of it is scary. So not many people have showed up to the county meetings. So Keep Calvert Country decided to have a meeting that was on Zoom. And as a citizen at this time, because I was not representing ACLT, I spoke about the good things about the new zoning regulations and the new maps, but I pointed out some major concerns about expanding all the residential development that they were proposing. And we also had a discussion about Fishing Creek. That maybe Fishing Creek should also be Farm and Forest District and should be in the rural legacy area. There seemed to be strong support for that. And particularly so if you look at these maps. The map on the far left shows in red and blue are lands, red, blue, and orange are lands that are currently rural legacy areas, okay? So they're eligible, you can use state funds to protect lands that are in the red, blue, or orange. But look, there's this big hole for Fishing Creek. And aren't there good conservation areas in that Fishing Creek watershed? Well, look to the map in the middle, and you see that the Nature Conservancy has identified that as having a lot of most resilient lands. Lands that are still pretty much intact, still have a lot of forest land. As a matter of fact, 60%, 66% of that watershed is forested. And then if you look at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife map on the right, they have identified it as having high habitat importance areas in that location. So we've been working on the notion of asking the commissioners during this rezoning process and through the rural legacy area process to get this place established and giving the property owners the opportunity to use funds from these programs to protect the remaining lands there. So, you know, ACLT has moved more towards big landscape conservation, but really we're big landscape people from the beginning. You know, when ACLT bought its first piece of land, it was saying, but we're also interested in protecting all of Parker's Creek and Governor's Run, and we were interested in Battle Creek as well. Now, Battle Creek was then severed off, and that was the interest of Calvert Nature Society. But like I said, ACLT has been big picture, and we might as well have that picture big enough so that we can engage and support others to protect lands, you know, on both sides of the Patuxent River, you know, and all the way to the Potomac. So that's it for me. I wanted to focus on those particular kinds of projects, and a lot of this is happening because of Mary Hoover and Clara Brill Carlat. The capacity grant has given us the capacity to do all of these extra projects, to take on this stuff and protect at the regional scale that we just haven't had the staff to do before. So we're hoping that that funding will continue such that we can keep These two are wonderful people, and they're going to be presenting for me and Autumn at the dinner auction. So you'll get to see some of their stuff that I didn't show you tonight because I wanted to be able to hear from them the kind of work that they've been doing. Questions?
So first, I'm going to say thank you, donors, for making that challenge grant a success. That we're maxing it out every year so far, and hopefully we'll continue to do that for the whole 5 years, because we, you can see, we're really leveraging that money and turning it into some amazing work. So thank you, Greg, for sharing that. So, yeah, questions, concerns, ideas.
Well, I have a concern. It's Darlene. Everything sounds, really, really terrific, and I'm happy to hear all of it. But with my limited knowledge and whatever, how do we make bicyclists safe on Route 4? It's hard for me to envisioning that happening.
So there are a number of steps that they've successfully done in other places. Right now, they have added one rumble strip along most of Route 4. It's not all the way contiguous, and I want to continue. So I will see that happen because, a rumble strip right next to the white line on the side of the road is to alert people when they start to stray out of the lane. That needs to be everywhere because it really does, catch people when their wheel hits that, and that gives protection to the cyclist. But they also need to properly identify that as a place that the state is saying, yes, you can ride a bike, that it's not just people like me and Shirley who'd like to get out for a ride and don't want to have to bring a car everywhere, that it's legal for us to be there. We're not, slipping in. And you'd be amazed how many people really do bike. I see it all the time because I'm a bicyclist, just ride from my house to ACLT. I see all the people on the side roads. And if you go look at the bike rack behind McDonald's is full all the time. And those are people who come there to work. And I don't know if it's by choice or by necessity, but everybody should have the right to be there and be feeling safe on a bike. And so then there are other things you can do in more urban areas. Sometimes when things get close, is you even put up some of those devices that they have right across from right on Route 4 at that restaurant that I don't eat at. I mean, there's certain kind of barriers that you can also put up in addition to the markings. And there's also a little second rumble strip that you can put that's about 6 inches from the first. So that even further gives attention. But the state has some good standards, but the state has not applied them across the board. It's a cheap way to save lives. And as citizens, we really need to be asking for that. And then asking where we can on county roads where the traffic volumes are not too high to mark those for that purpose. So the drivers know that they can ride on those roads as well, like Barstow Road. Barstow Road is not a high volume road. And on around to where I live on Stokely Road. Now, it's got a few hills that may be difficult to ride, but I feel safe on those roads. But I would like to see markings on them so that the drivers know that it's okay for me to be there.
Well, Greg, I can reiterate exactly what you're talking about. I used to feel safe riding from our home on Wilson Road to get to Dares Beach Road to get to Route 4. The scary part is getting on Wilson Road because
Yeah.
there's no such thing as any kind of shoulder or anything like that for riding your bike and riding with traffic. It's pretty scary. So right now at my age, I'm putting my bike on my truck, taking it to where I want to go ride safely,
I know.
and then just kind of
Yeah,
riding
Wilson
around
Road's
like
got too much traffic now.
it does.
People are using that as a bypass for Route 4.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's pretty scary. And we're from Cassell to Dares Beach. Our home is on the right-hand side there as you're
Yeah.
traveling south. And it's pretty scary. I don't even ride out the driveway. I'll get on Cassell and take the back route to Dares Beach, and then I'll ride to Dares Beach, or if I feel up to it, I'll go ahead and ride to Prince Frederick or the other direction, heading west on Dares Beach. But
Yeah.
I understand that there's still changes that have to be made. And Darlene, thank you for bringing that up, because it's really hard to see that, those rumble strips aren't everywhere just yet. The hope is that they get there eventually, and that bicycle safety continues to be a priority.
Yep. Anybody else?
This is sort of a divergent question, but it maybe has some funding possibilities in the future. When his name escapes me now, I'm sorry to say, was chair of SMECO. I'm sorry,
Yes.
direct. We had
Joe Slater.
we had a good friend there in a high visibility position. We have in Calvert County a lot of BG&E right away that I've just noticed here where I drive, that it looks like they have been able to restrain themselves from mowing it down to a stubble height this late summer, and it's just full of goldenrod and probably other plants that are pollinator and wildlife friendly. I was wondering if we know if that is a policy change that BG&E has made, because they used to insist that everything had to be mowed close.
I give them a lot of credit. They have changed policy, and not across the board, but they employed it where we own land because they knew we'd be interested in it, and I appreciate that they reached out and yep.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, but I thought you might be asking another thing that we're looking into, and that is
Tell me.
whether we could have a bike trail on the BG power line.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be sweet?
Yep. So that's an ask I'm going to be making coming up soon, because that could be a really cool way to travel.
Oh my gosh, it would give them so much greenwash.
Where'd you say, Greg?
If we could get permission to use their paths that they have put in for their trucks, use them as a bikeway to travel north-south in the county. Now, some places that would require bridges, bikeable bridges, to make that happen, but it would be could be a fantastic project.
Yeah. Well, lots of opportunity for volunteer and corporate roll up your shirt sleeves and get busy, get to work on those bridges. Can you just imagine the PR?
So it's a reach, but we're going to be asking that. As a matter of fact, I just talked to a former BGE guy at the Parkers Creek Challenge, and he's already looking for a name for me to reach out to. So hopefully, fingers crossed.
Wow.
Good idea.
That's how many thousand acres do you suppose they have in Calvert?
Oh, I used to know.
Yeah,
I
it'd
mean,
be,
just down there, they've got like 3 or 4,000 acres. So I don't know
within,
how long that power line is, but it's a lot of a lot of acres. And it is a great greenway. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a wildlife area. It's a corridor for certain wildlife.
very good.
So,
Thanks for
all
all you
right.
do.
Any other questions? Delighted to see my friends here for this event. And thank you for coming. And
Thank
again,
you.
I'm hoping that everyone can make it to the dinner auction on the 8th.
Yes, please come and bid.
Yeah.
There should be lots of good experiences to bid on.
I will tell you, Miriam was going through them with me. We have some very exciting ones this year. And Pat Griffin is making his house available again. He says that island is back up. He says it's better than new. So
Right.
Nice.
The
that's
island.
another. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I will stop recording.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Thank you.